Dynasty football never ends. Even though the 2020 regular season and the fantasy season is over, that just means it's time to start preparing and maybe make some off-season trades. We're going to talk about some players that might be valuable on the trade market. Do you buy or do you sell? This is the time to be active right now before the NFL draft and things change. So today we're going to talk about Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, possibly former Steelers wide receiver, JuJu Smith-Schuster. This is a good time, Chris, because coming off that really surprising to me playoff loss, JuJu coming off a huge game, but again, it could be his final game as a Steeler. So first of all, what do you think about that? The fact that he did have such a big game and then now might be walking away from the team in free agency.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at it, all the receivers had a big game because Big Ben threw the ball the most any quarterback has ever thrown the ball in a playoff game because they had to, right? They were down big the whole game. They were in comeback mode. So you can't really look at this and say, oh, JuJu had this monster game. I mean, again, go back and look. All the receivers had good games. Even Eric Ebron had a good game. Big Ben was just throwing the ball to anybody and everybody, whatever he could do. I do think they're going to let JuJu walk, though. If we look at the history of the Steelers, apart from Antonio Brown, they have a history of letting wide receivers walk, and they have Deontay Johnson, and they just drafted Chase Claypool, who had a fine rookie year. So it doesn't seem to me that they have any need for JuJu Smith-Schuster. So I do think he's going to walk. I think the Steelers are going to let him walk, and that's certainly going to affect his dynasty value without a doubt.
Yeah, like you said, I think there's very little chance that he's still in Pittsburgh next year. I mean, not a coincidence they drafted Chase Claypool early last year and kind of made a point of making Deontay Johnson their number one target throughout the season. And so kind of proving they don't really need him per se. They have enough weapons there. Does Big Ben still have it? Well, that's a matter for a different video. But talk about JuJu. His year this year was very interesting. Of course, the whole Steelers season was very up and down, but the way he was used was very different. And we've discussed this during the season. His average depth of target, his ADOT, was ridiculously low. 5.5 was his ADOT. Okay, that ranks him 281st among all receivers and players. Talk about tight ends, running backs, receivers, anybody who catch the ball. 280 players had a higher depth of target than JuJu. Okay, so he's like a glorified J.D. McKissick, basically, the way he's used. I don't imagine that another team that he signs with would use him this way. His air yard percentage just on his own team, the Steelers, he came in fourth, and that was barely ahead of James Washington. Okay, so he was it's almost like going from a featured receiver to just another guy there. I mean, do you think this has something to do with him personally? Do you think it's the way do you think that this could be a trend, or do you think he can get back to being the old JuJu if he goes somewhere else?
I definitely think he can get back to being the old JuJu. I think it was just more a fact of they had Deontay Johnson, they drafted Chase Claypool, so they had two, dynamic outside receivers, and his role just became that underneath, almost like a safety valve for Ben Roethlisberger more than anything. But if you look at his numbers, if you go back to his, age 22 season when he put up 1,400 yards and 111 catches, he averaged 6.9 receptions per game. He still averaged 6.1 receptions per game this year. So it wasn't like he wasn't involved in the offense. Like you said, he was just involved very, very differently. And prior to this year, he had never had averaged less than 12.8 yards per reception. This year, it was 8.6. That's literally running back level. So no team out there is going to sign JuJu Smith-Schuster to be a glorified running back. He's definitely going to have a much better role wherever he goes. I can't imagine it being any worse. That's for sure.
Yeah, I got to think so. He's going to demand a pretty big contract, and any team that does pay to have him, they're going to use him for sure. All right, so here's the thing. Entering his fifth NFL season, it's easy to forget he's only 24 years old. He came into the league, one of the youngest players, and he's still super young. So for dynasty purposes, a lot to look forward to. Where he winds up, we don't know yet, but let's talk about his value. So right now, as far as our early rankings go, I have him as wide receiver 18, still as a top 20 wide receiver, a lot of that based on age, and that places him in my top 30 overall. Do you feel like he's a top 20 receiver in Dynasty at the moment?
Probably. I mean, I'd have to look at the other receivers. I mean, yes, it's hard for me to say no because again, he just turned 24, right? He's not even halfway through his age 24 season. So he'll be 24 when the NFL season starts next year, and we've seen what he can do. And if he goes to a great landing spot to a team that really needs a receiver, his ADP, his value is going to skyrocket. So I think right now at the moment, wide receiver 20 is probably fair, but I think come, July, August, maybe even after free agency in March, that will be much higher.
All right, so here's the million-dollar question, what we're here to answer. If you have JuJu Smith-Schuster on a dynasty roster right now, is this the time before he signs, before the NFL draft and things kind of start to fall in place? If you have him right now, is he a player to buy, sell, or hold?
Well, if I have JuJu, I'm holding him unless I get just some incredible offer. But the problem is you're not going to get an incredible offer right now because his perceived value is much lower than it should be. Now, if I don't have JuJu Smith-Schuster, I am 100% trying to buy right now. Now, I'm not going to, I might overpay a little bit. And when I say overpay, I mean overpay in terms of perceived value. But I'm not going to overpay for him by doing, something crazy and giving up a for sure better wide receiver than him. But if I can get JuJu on the relatively cheap, I'm doing that now because you don't want to wait till free agency. And like I said, he ends up signing to some team who needs a wide receiver and has a good passing game, and suddenly his value is through the roof and you can't buy JuJu anymore. So right now, I think is the absolute best time to go out, put out the feelers, put out the trade offers for JuJu, see what you can get. Don't drastically overpay. But if you have to overpay slightly, I'm okay with that because I think down the road, it could look like you actually got him, at a bargain.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I always think pretty highly of JuJu just because he did help me win a couple of fantasy championships 2 years ago, but he is one of the most talented receivers, and we can't deny the fact that, Pittsburgh's offense, inconsistent at best. Ben Roethlisberger just didn't look like himself most of the year, obviously culminating with that crazy playoff game. Crazy. I mean, yeah, he threw for 500 yards. He also threw 4 interceptions and lost the game. This offense was just weird. He had so many different targets to compete with. He's going to be brought in to be, if not the guy, at least the number 2 guy on a team. I think his target share goes up. His ADOT definitely goes up. I think there's nowhere to go but up for him. He's still super young. I think that everything points in the right direction. And so coming off a season that's by his standard disappointing, this is probably the best time to go out and try to get JuJu. If I have him, I'm definitely holding him. If I don't, I'm making an offer right now. Again, I don't see him as a top 10 receiver necessarily. I don't see him as the wide receiver 1, like the anchor on your team. So don't overspend to that extent. I don't think you want to necessarily give up a really high, top 5 pick for him. But this is the time to make an offer, I think, like you said, right now, because his value in the dynasty world is about to shoot up as far as I'm concerned. I think he lands in a good team with a good offense. Maybe Indianapolis has some money to spend. Maybe the Dolphins. I mean, there's definitely some teams out there that will definitely make him a focal point of the offense. All right, so we're going to talk about dynasty buy sell all off season long to help you make the most informed decisions. Hopefully give you guys some good advice. If you have questions about what to do, maybe some dynasty trade offers to throw away, let us know. Hit us up with a comment here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll be with you all off season long. All right, thanks for watching.